normal day at school takes a terrifying turn when a little girl rushes out of the washroom in tears and speaks 4 words that leave the janitor completely pale. What did she say that shook him to his core? Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know in the comments, what would you do if you overheard a child say something that sent chills down your spine? Elijah Carter never expected his life to change in the middle of a routine afternoon. He was used to blending into the background, pushing his mop across the school's tiled floors and keeping the hallways clean. Most of the kids didn't pay him much attention. That was fine with him. He wasn't here for conversation. He was here to work. It was lunchtime, and most of the kids had flooded the cafeteria, their laughter echoing through the halls. The few who weren't there were either in the library, the nurse's office, or sneaking around where they weren't supposed to be. Elijah had just finished cleaning up a mess near the gym when he heard hurried footsteps against the floor. Tiny, fast, frantic. Then came the sobs. Elijah barely had time to turn his head before the little girl burst out of the bathroom. She was no older than 6 or 7, her face red, tears streaking down her cheeks. Her small body shook with every breath. But it was her eyes, wide, unblinking, that sent a wave of unease through him. She looked scared. No, not scared. Terrified. Elijah dropped the mop and instinctively knelt down. "Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong?" His voice was low, calm, careful. She hesitated, trembling fingers curling into the hem of her shirt. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she choked out 4 words. Elijah's body went rigid. A cold wave of shock surged through his chest, seeping into his bones. His breath caught in his throat. The hallway around him blurred as the words echoed in his ears. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. He glanced toward the washroom, his mind racing. Every part of him screamed to move, to do something, but his feet felt glued to the floor. The little girl tugged at his sleeve. Her lip quivered. "Please," she whispered, eyes pleading. Elijah swallowed hard and forced himself to breathe. "Okay," he murmured, gripping the girl's shoulders gently. "Stay right here, all right? Don't move." She nodded, her small frame still trembling. Elijah stood up and turned toward the bathroom, his heart pounding against his ribs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he pushed the door open, stepping inside. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. The row of sinks was clean, the stall doors were closed, and there was no immediate sign of danger. But Elijah had been around long enough to know when something was off. He took another step forward, his breath steady, but his nerves on high alert. Then he noticed it. One of the stall doors was slightly ajar. Not enough to see inside, but enough to tell that someone was there. Elijah's fingers clenched. "Hello?" His voice echoed against the tiled walls. No response. He took a cautious step forward, pushing the door open a little more. The stall was empty. Elijah frowned. His gut told him otherwise. Then he saw it. The faintest movement, a shadow shifting under the next stall. Someone was there. Hiding. Watching. Elijah's heart pounded. He had seen enough in his life to know when something wasn't right, and right now, something was very, very wrong. He took a slow breath, keeping his voice even. "If someone's in here, you should come out now." Silence. Elijah's pulse quickened. He took another step forward, reaching out. Just as his fingers grazed the next stall door, there was a sound, so sudden, so sharp, that it made his stomach drop. A soft, muffled whimper. His muscles tensed. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Elijah's grip tightened around the door. His throat was dry. He knew whatever was behind that door wasn't something he could ignore. But before he could act, before he could even take another breath, the door creaked open, and Elijah felt his blood turn ice cold. Elijah's breath hitched as the stall door creaked open ever so slowly. His fingers twitched at his sides, his entire body tensed as he waited for whatever, or whoever, was inside to reveal itself. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows across the tiled floor. Then the stall door stopped moving. Silence. Elijah swallowed hard. He could feel his pulse thrumming in his throat, his mind racing a mile a minute. He didn't want to startle whoever or whatever was hiding inside. If there was one thing he had learned from working at the school for years, it was that fear could make people unpredictable. But he also knew something else. He wasn't dealing with a normal situation. A child doesn't run out of the bathroom crying and whispering 4 chilling words if there's nothing to be afraid of. Elijah took a slow step forward. "It's okay," he said, his voice as steady as he could manage. "You can come out now." The seconds dragged. Then a small hand emerged from the gap in the stall door. A tiny, trembling hand. Elijah's breath caught. He recognized that hand. It was another little girl. She was younger than the one who had come running to him, maybe 5 years old, her fingers clutching the edge of the stall with a desperate kind of grip. She hesitated, her small body still half-handed behind the door. Elijah softened his stance. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, kneeling slightly. "You okay?" Her head shook violently, and her grip on the stall door tightened. That was when Elijah noticed something else. Her eyes weren't just wide with fear. They were darting, frantic, looking at someone, behind him. Elijah's body stiffened. He turned, his stomach twisting into knots. The bathroom had felt empty when he walked in, but now, standing in the silence, feeling the weight of the little girl's panicked gaze, Elijah knew something wasn't right. Slowly, carefully, he scanned the room. The mirrors along the wall reflected his own tense expression, the row of sinks gleaming under the harsh white lights. Nothing seemed out of place. But Elijah had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him. His eyes landed on the last stall. Unlike the others, it was shut, locked from the inside. His pulse hammered in his ears. He turned back to the little girl, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Is there someone else in here with us?" The girl hesitated, then barely perceptible, she nodded. Elijah felt his throat tighten. He straightened, his hand curling into a fist at his side. "All right," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He took a step toward the locked stall. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt. The dim hum of the lights above seemed louder, the sterile scent of disinfectant thick in his nostrils. Elijah reached out, his knuckles tapping against the stall door. "Hey," he called out, forcing his voice to stay level. "You okay in there?" Silence. His stomach clenched. He knocked again. "Listen, if you need help, I can—" Scratch. The sound came from inside the stall. A slow, deliberate scratch against the door. Elijah froze. The tiny girl whimpered behind him. "All right," Elijah said, forcing himself to breathe. He grabbed the lock, testing it. "I'm going to open this door, okay?" The scratching stopped. Elijah exhaled and braced himself. With one firm motion, he twisted the lock and pushed the door open. And then, nothing. The stall was empty. Elijah blinked. His pulse was still hammering, his body still locked in tension. But there was no one there, no shadowy figure, no intruder lurking behind the door. Just an empty stall. Elijah turned back toward the little girl. She was staring at the stall, her tiny hands gripping the fabric of her dress. Her lips trembled, and her gaze flickered toward the wall. It was only then that Elijah noticed something else. There were scratches, not just on the stall door, but on the wall. Deep, jagged scratches carved into the paint, running all the way down to the floor. Elijah felt a chill run through him. This wasn't normal. He turned back to the girl. "What happened here?" She sniffled. Her voice was barely a whisper. Who's in there? Elijah's chest tightened. Who? Her tiny fingers curled into her dress. The man. Elijah's blood ran cold. There was a man in here. His voice was calm, but his grip on the edge of the sink tightened. The little girl nodded. Elijah's mind raced. A stranger, in the school, in the bathroom. But if that was true, then where did he go? Elijah scanned the room again. The only exit was the door he had come through. The air vents were too small for an adult to fit through. There was nowhere else to go. And yet, the girl had been staring at something. Elijah followed her gaze. His stomach dropped. The wall. There was something wrong with the wall. The tiles weren't aligned perfectly, not like the others. There was a faint outline, a small, rectangular shape where the grout didn't match the rest. A panel. A hidden panel. Elijah reached out, pressing his fingers against the tile. It moved. A small, almost imperceptible shift. Elijah's breath hitched. There was a hidden space behind the wall. His mind raced. Was someone watching the girls from in there? Hiding? Elijah had seen a lot of things in his life. But this was something else entirely. He turned back to the little girl. You're safe now, okay? He forced a small smile. I need you to go find a teacher. Tell them to call the principal. The girl hesitated, glancing at the wall. Elijah, she whispered, what if he comes back? Elijah clenched his jaw. He didn't have an answer for that. But one thing was certain. He needed to find out exactly what was behind that wall, before it was too late. Elijah took a deep breath, his heart thudding against his ribs as he reached for the loose tile. His fingers hesitated for just a moment before he gripped the edge and pulled. The tile came loose with a faint pop. Behind it, darkness. A void. Elijah's throat tightened. He leaned in, his eyes adjusting to the dim space beyond the wall, his nostrils filled with the scent of dust and something else. Something stale, like air that had been trapped for too long. A hidden passage. His grip tightened on the tile as he moved closer, trying to make out anything inside. It was a small space, no bigger than a closet, but the more he looked, the more he realized this wasn't just a random hole in the wall. This space had been used before. Scattered across the floor were tiny, discarded objects. Bits of paper, a broken pencil, even a small pink hair clip. Elijah's stomach twisted. His breath came slow and deep as he reached forward, pressing his fingers against the wall inside. It was rough, uneven. Scratches covered the surface, like fingernails had clawed at it in desperation. A chill ran down his spine. Someone had been inside this space. Recently. Elijah? The voice made him jump. He turned sharply to see the little girl standing at the entrance of the bathroom, her big, fearful eyes locked on him. I told the teacher, she whispered. She said she's coming. Elijah exhaled. Good, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. You did the right thing, sweetheart. But even as he spoke, something inside him told him that time was running out. Whoever had been hiding in this space, they were gone now. But they had been here for a reason. Elijah stood up fully, looking at the small hidden compartment. Then he noticed something else. Footprints. Not just the random scuff marks of a janitor or a careless student. These were different. They were fresh. And they were big. His breath caught in his throat. They led out of the compartment. Whoever had been inside that space hadn't been hiding when he walked in. They had been watching. Elijah's pulse roared in his ears. His eyes darted to the bathroom door. It was still open. Wide open. His entire body went cold. Whoever had been in there, they were still in the school. Nearly Elijah. The little girl's voice snapped him back. He turned to her, his voice calm but urgent. Where's the teacher? He's coming, the girl said, biting her lip. But... What? The little girl hesitated. I saw him, she whispered. Elisha's breath caught. "Saw who?" "The man," she said, her voice barely audible. "When I left, he was in the hallway." Elijah's blood ran cold. His instincts kicked into overdrive. He moved quickly to the doorway, scanning the empty hall. Nothing. But that didn't mean no one was there. He turned back to the girl. "Which way did he go?" She pointed. Elijah's grip on reality tightened. He had two choices: wait for security or go after him himself. The answer was clear. "Stay here," he said firmly. "Don't move." Before she could protest, Elijah was moving. He stepped into the hallway, his heart beat a steady drum against his ribs. His eyes scanned the corridor, looking for anything. Anyone. Then he saw it. A figure. Just at the far end of the hall, near the exit doors. Tall. Dressed in dark clothes. Moving fast. Elijah's pulse spiked. He ran. His feet pounded against the polished floor as he sprinted toward the exit. The man glanced over his shoulder. Just for a second, their eyes locked. The man bolted. Elijah pushed harder, his legs burning as he closed the distance. The exit doors swung open with a violent crash, the man barreling through them into the staff parking lot. Elijah followed. The afternoon air hit him like a slap, the sun stark and blinding. He scanned the lot, eyes darting between parked cars. Then, a flash of movement. Near the fence, the man was climbing. Elijah surged forward. "Hey!" The man didn't stop. He scrambled over the fence, landing on the other side with a stumble. And then, he was gone. Elijah skidded to a stop, breath heaving, his fingers clenched into fists. Too late. He turned back toward the school, his mind spinning. Who was he? A stranger? A predator? Or someone who had been hiding here for a long time? Elijah swallowed hard and made his way back inside. By the time he reached the hallway, the principal was there. So were two teachers. The little girl stood by them, her tiny frame tense with worry. "Leisha," the principal said, her brows furrowed. "What's going on?" Elijah exhaled. "There was someone here," he said. "Hiding. Watching." The principal's face paled. "What?" Elijah turned to the little girl. "You saw him, didn't you?" She nodded, clinging to her teacher's hand. The principal's expression hardened. "We need to check the security cameras." Elijah nodded. "And call the police." The next hour was a blur. The school was put on lockdown. The police arrived. The cameras were checked. But when they reviewed the footage, something strange happened. The man was there. Just for a second, a blurry shadow in the corner of the hallway. And then, nothing. No record of where he went. No record of him leaving the building. Like he had vanished. Like he had never been there at all. Elijah watched the footage over and over, his stomach twisted. He knew what he saw. He knew what she saw. And he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.